Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's art advice video. In today's video I'm going to share with you some really basic tips which you can implement to improve your realistic animal drawings. So if you want to really improve your animal studies and really get on top of that realism, then these tips are going to be for you, so carry on watching. So let's dive straight into these tips, and the first one I have for you is to make sure that you use reference material. And this is extremely important, especially if you aren't familiar with your animal. So there are certain animals that obviously we can't go and look at and observe from real life, like elephants or like animals which are on a different continent to us. Sometimes it's going to be difficult to go and actually observe an animal, so it's really important to use reference material when you can and when you need to. It's also not really practical to go and observe animals in the flesh either. You can observe a cat or a dog if you have one of those are particularly easy, but sometimes going to a zoo and observing the animals there, sometimes that's not really practical either. So using reference material is really going to help you, and it's going to help you with your proportions, and it's better to have that sort of snapshot in your mind of the animal that you're drawing. It's better to actually reference something and get it right than make it up and get it wrong. Using a reference image or reference material will also allow you to get those accurate drawings, and it will help you to understand the anatomy. So if you was to look at a selection of dog images and you just wanted to sort of understand how the nose sort of sits within a dog muzzle and how the fur sort of sits around a nose, you could study a selection of reference images and you could really grasp that idea, and you can draw from those reference images and really apply that to your realistic drawing. The main point of using a reference image or reference material is that it allows you to draw what you see and not what you think you see. So again, it stops you from making up certain compositions within your mind, and it allows you to actually draw what you're seeing and what the animal is actually like. So reference images, although some people might be against them, are really helpful for your artistic journey, and they're really helpful to help you grow and really grasp the idea of composition, of the sort of accurate anatomy of the animal that you're drawing. So this next tip is more of a general coloured pencil tip, but it also is really important for when you are drawing animals, so I thought I would include this, and that is to always make sure that your pencil is sharp. And I cannot stress this one enough, that sharp pencils really do make all the difference within your drawings. Having a sharp pencil allows for a smooth, even colour laydown. It's really good for adding the shading, and it's also good for adding the details. So it's always a great idea to make sure that you have a really good sharpener that's going to sharpen your pencils to get that really fine sharp point, so that you get that smooth colour, so that you get those really light layers as well, and so that you can add in those really sharp details. So if you have tried to use a blunt-ish or a really blunt pencil to add details, they're not going to come out really sharp. But if you have that really sharp point on your pencil, then you're going to get really accurate pinprick details, and it's going to make your realistic animal drawings really come to life by having that sharp pencil and adding in those sharp details. This next tip is also more of a general coloured pencil tip, but I thought I would include it because again it is really essential, and that is just to use extremely light pressure. You're going to be able to get so many layers by using light pressure. If you go in with a hard pressure, you're going to diminish the tooth of the paper and you're not going to get as many layers down, and you're not going to be able to get accurate colours or accurate details when it comes to adding those details. So you want to go in with really light pressure. You can really get sort of infinite layers. So the lighter you use your pencil, the more layers you're going to be able to get, and you're going to be able to create a real depth of realism, and you're going to be able to create loads of different tones within your colours. You're going to be able to add all of those really fine details on top with absolutely no problem. The next tip is line length, and when I mean line length, I mean how it pertains to the fur and the direction that the fur is going in. So before you actually start to add any layers of pencil, you need to sort of study your reference photo really closely, or whatever you're using, and you need to determine the direction of your fur and also the length of your fur. So you need to look at it and think, is this short fur, is it long fur, or is it somewhere in between? And then you need to apply that, you need to keep that in your mind and apply that to how you are using your pencil. So if you have shorter fur, you're going to want to make really short marks on your paper, and if you have a longer fur, then you want to create really long flowing marks with your pencil. And I have a whole tutorial on how you can actually render different types of fur, and I will link that as a card up above and in the description if you're interested in learning more on the actual fur technique. But line length is really important, because if you was to go in with really long strokes on a short haired animal, it's going to make that animal look really long haired, and you're going to lose that element of realism. So you really want to make sure that you do pay attention to the length of the fur, or the sort of direction of the fur, the direction of feathers, anything like that, and you want to make sure that you apply that through your pencil. So you want to make sure you're working in the correct direction with the correct length of line. The next tip is to identify your values, and you can do this by really studying your reference, by really looking at your reference photo, and you want to find the lightest and the darkest areas within your reference material. So you want to make sure you really study it, and if you are having real difficulty finding those lighter and darker areas, a tip and a trick that I usually do is to just slightly squint at the reference photo, because it really makes those values pop out a lot more without sort of distracting your eye with other things, so the mid-tone values. So if you squint at a reference photo, you can see the really dark areas a lot more, and you can see those lighter areas a lot more. So that's a good tip for identifying your values. Once you've identified your values, you need to make sure that you mark those down when creating your outline. So it's okay to sort of just do the general outline and shape of the animal, but you also need to note down any of those values and where those values change. So it's a good idea to map those down when you are drawing your outline, however you decide to draw your outline, whether that's grid, tracing, or freehand. Make sure that you map down those value changes on your line drawing. Tip number 6 is to decide on your techniques, materials and colours, and this is really important because it sort of takes that element of uncertainty out of your drawing. So sometimes, especially when I first started, I wouldn't really map out what techniques I was going to use. I'd sort of flip between using a solvent and burnishing. I would use a mountain of colours, stop the drawing, put them all away, and then when it came to draw again, I wouldn't know what colours I had previously used. So it's a good idea to really think about your drawing before you actually go in and just start drawing it. So decide on what techniques you want to use, whether you want to use like a solvent for blending, whether you want to use a blender pen, or whether you want to burnish and blend with your coloured pencils, because that all makes a difference to this overall tone and the overall sort of finish of your piece. Then you need to think about your materials. So again, whether you're going to use a solvent, what kind of coloured pencils you're going to use, whether you're going to use any other media with it, whether you're going to have a watercolour base or a marker base, anything like that. You just sort of need to stop and think about before you actually start applying colour to your paper. So similarly with your colours, it's a really good idea to sort of pick the tones and the sort of colours that you want to do. You might not want to work to a limited palette because that might be too limiting for you, especially if you are a beginner, but you just want to pick the sort of overall tones. So you want to identify in your reference photo the main tones which are popping out. So perhaps you are drawing a squirrel and there are some red tones, orange tones, but there's also maybe some purple tones in there. So you just want to sort of map out the type of colours that you're actually going to need to use to create your piece. The next tip is to make sure you really look at the details on your reference photo. So you want to make sure that you pick out any sort of distinguishing marks and anything that you feel really creates the piece. So if something that you're drawing has really bright shiny eyes and they are the drawing point for your picture, you want to make sure that you focus a lot of attention and detail on that point because that's going to be where the eye is drawn to. So you want to make sure that you really study your reference material and just sort of think about where you want the viewer's eye to focus. So I like people's eyes to really focus on the eyes of the animal because I feel like it gives them a sense of the soul of the animal. So I like to spend a lot of time and put a lot of detail into those areas. And I feel like that is what kind of creates a more realistic piece, is having those really characteristic details, having those really delicate details added in certain points. Maybe not over the entire piece, but especially in certain points where the eye is drawn to, it's really important to have those areas of detail. The last tip I have for you guys is patience, and this one might seem pretty obvious, but with coloured pencil work it does take a long time, and it does take a long time to sort of build your skill as well. So it's really important that you have patience, that you take your time with your piece, and that you work as slowly and as accurately as you possibly can, and apply the previous tips to your work. So make sure you've got that reference photo, make sure you've got a sharp pencil, which is good for adding those details and really good for adding those layers, and just really analyze the fur direction or the feather direction or anything, identify those values, just really take your time and really plan your piece, and it's going to really help you and it's going to improve your level of realism. So I really hope you have enjoyed today's video, and I hope that these tips have helped you and that you can apply them to your work so that you can improve your realistic drawings. Perhaps you were struggling with one of these, or perhaps you had a mistake with your realistic drawing and you didn't quite know how to fix it to gain that level of realism. Then I really hope that these tips have helped you to just grow on your skills. If you know of any other tips which I haven't mentioned in this video and you think are really important and vital for people to use and learn to grow, then pop them in the comments below and let's have a little discussion and help each other grow as artists. If you like this video, then make sure you give it a big thumbs up, and if you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and there are some more videos over there for you to check out. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!